Hi, friends. Welcome to the Plane Fun RC channel, and I'm your host, Saul, and we've begun the build of the Volksplane by Aero-naut. So what you're seeing here is you're seeing the fuselage halves over here and over here. And because the instructions are so poor and there's no set of plans, it's kind of like building a puzzle without a picture. It's not great, but that's okay. We're going to work our way through it. It's just going to take a little longer than what I thought it would. Now, let's talk to you about these various pieces that you see here at the moment. You can see each half has two pieces that are glued together. Now you've got this half over here, which is R1A, and then the other half here, which is R1B. And it's impossible to go through and to glue this piece to this side here because this is cut in such a way where there's a slight differentiation between the two, so you can't mix it up. Now, I will tell you that you can see the lines here for the support pieces for the side of the fuselage. When they cut this piece, they did draw the lines, but they drew it on the wrong side. So we just have to transpose the lines so they're on the correct side. So we're going to make this video of this process a very step-by-step process because basically the instructions are, like I said, are just very poor. And without a set of plans, it does make it very difficult. And I want to help anyone that might be looking to build this plane so they can use the video as a resource. Now, we are going to go ahead. The next step, we're going to take our piece here, and we're going to take that, and we're going to add that to the top and bottom portions of the fuselage so it runs along just like that, okay? All right, friends, more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, let's talk about what we've got going on here. So we've got our spruce fuselage support pieces that have been put in place along the full length of the fuselage, as you can see here, all the way up to the front. We've also added our supporting braces here along the fuselage. Now, you don't add one back here because there's going to be a former back here, so keep that in mind. Now, the way you determine the proper placement of the fuselage supporting pieces is you want to dry fit the formers in place. The reason for that is you can see here we've got a notch in the former, and it's imperative that the fuselage supporting pieces, stiffeners, if you will, that they are placed correctly, otherwise the formers will not fit. And also make sure you do that on the top of the former as well. Now you notice there's an extra gap here. We're going to be putting another piece of spruce that'll run from here all the way up to the other former here. Okay, the only thing we have to do left is only thing we have left to do is to go ahead and add some supporting plywood pieces here in the fuselage joiners, because these sides are very thin ply, and it's important to add supporting pieces here. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to do that, and more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update here, you can see we've gone ahead and we have put on all of our fuselage reinforcement pieces on both halves of the fuselage. Now, let's talk a little bit about this doubler right here. One of the things you want to keep in mind is that this particular doubler is 34 centimeters long, and you're going to make an angled cut. And the way you determine where the angled cut needs to sit is you're going to measure 18 millimeters from the end to here, and then you're going to draw an angled line and make an angled cut. So once again, the piece is 34 centimeters long, and the measurement for the angled cut is made 18 millimeters from the end, and that's very important. Now, the other thing you want to keep in mind is you want to be careful that this particular doubler does not cover up this piece. So you may have to cut out a little notch here and here. So this opening is very important. It's for the fuselage formers. Speaking of the fuselage formers, you can see we've gone ahead and we are laminating our formers. Each former comes in two pieces, and they have to be epoxied together. And you can see we've got one former over here that we haven't yet glued, which we're about to, and that's what they look like. So keep that in mind, and it's imperative, absolutely imperative, that they are very, very even going all the way around, because these notches that you see here, they then are placed into the notches here on the fuselage sides. Now, let me talk to you real quick about R6. R6, it has two thick plywood pieces. This piece goes on the rear. This piece goes on the front. Okay, like this. That's very important. It doesn't say that in the instruction manual, so just keep that in mind. All right, friends, let's laminate our pieces. More to come. All right, friends, you can see our former R6A is together. And just a quick reminder, this is the rear of the former, where you see R6A, and then R6B is the front of the former. All right, let's go ahead and get these mounted. More to come. All right, friends, so we're continuing with our fuselage formers, and let's talk about what we've got going on here. So we've got these reinforcement pieces. You can see they're on each side of the former, and they're very important because they're involved in going through and helping to hold the wing and the struts in place. Now, when you go to put them on, you want, once again, you want to put your formers into the actual slots of the fuselage, and then go ahead and then put your reinforcement pieces in place, because you can see they have to line up properly with the actual piece here, the wood here that runs along the fuselage. So that's very important. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's go ahead and take them out, and more to come. All right, friends, we've gone ahead and we've started gluing our formers in place to the right side of the fuselage. And we have taken our magnetic holders. You can see here, they've got our formers perfectly at 90 degrees, which looks fantastic. And we're going to leave those magnetic holders in place, and then we're going to take our second half, our left side of our fuselage, and go ahead and we're just going to lay it right on top of the formers. Now, one friendly tip, when you're putting the formers on this plane, don't put any other formers on until the glue is perfectly dry. And I'll explain why in a little bit. More to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, you can see we now have both fuselage sides joined to the former, and she just looks great. This is a large airplane. For perspective, that table is 86 inches long, and you can see it extends almost the full length of the table. So this is a good size airplane. All right, we're shifting our focus now to the front former, which is R3, as you can see here. And then also our rear former, which is R6. Now, a couple things to keep in mind with R6. R6 is going to sit, obviously, back here, like so, okay? And you can see the two holes right here, right beside my thumb, that one and the one right there. Those are the holes that are going to have the eyelets that are going to wind up holding the horizontal stabilizer in place. So it's very important that you get a good surface-to-surface contact with the sides of the former and the notches here that will attach to the stiffeners here in the rear. The reason for that is this is the former that's going to hold the horizontal stabilizer in place. And as I mentioned before, this plane has a full flying horizontal stabilizer, so there's going to be a lot of force that's going to be generated by that horizontal stabilizer in flight, and therefore that force is obviously going to be placed directly on the R6A former. So one of the things you want to keep in mind is that when you are putting in the R6A, obviously we're going to take our sides, they're going to wind up being pulled together to meet the sides of the R6A former. Now when you do that, remember now, these fuselage sides are now going to angle this way. They're going to angle in. So the key thing to remember before you put this on, take a moment, and you can see I started doing it there on the top notch. Notice the slight angle, not much, it doesn't take much, but you're going to need to angle the notches, and you're going to need to angle the sides right here. Be careful not to remove that little notch, because that notch here is going to go into that slot right here, okay? All right, let's get R6 and R3 attached, and more to come. All right, friends, let's talk about what we've got going on here. We are in the process of properly positioning R6A. Let's talk about what we need to do. One of the first things you're going to do is you're going to draw a center line right down R6A, as you can see there. And the reason for that is because you're going to take a block that is 80 millimeters tall, and you're going to raise up one half of the fuselage, as you can see here, and then you're going to take a right angle, and you're going to hold that against the tabletop so that it measures 114 millimeters from the tabletop to the center line. You can see right there we've got a perfect alignment, which is great. The reason for that is going to help R6A, help to ensure that R6A is in line with the other formers, as you can see further up the fuselage there. And that's the important thing, making sure this is in line, R6A is in line with all of the others that are further up. Now, one of the important things you want to do before you raise this up, you want to make sure that you're going through and that you are clamping down the center of the fuselage, as you can see here, and not only on the bottom half, but also on the top half, and we're using a large, heavy jar of lead shot to hold that down. All right, let's go ahead and get R6A glued in, and more to come. All right, friends, we've shifted our focus to the F3 former, or the firewall, if you will. Let's talk about what we need to do to set up so we can properly glue it in place. Once again, the fuselage is still on its side and clamped to the table. We're using a 15mm block of wood, 15 millimeters in height, and we're sliding it underneath the actual fuselage, the bottom half of the fuselage. And the reason for that is we want to raise up the center line here so that it measures 114 millimeters from the actual tabletop itself. And you can see when we do that right there, roughly right about there, you can see it is very, very, very close to being exact, you know, just for some, except for some minor changes. All right, let's go ahead, let's get our former glued in place, and more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, let's talk about what we've been doing here. So we've installed R12. R12 sits in the rear bottom half of the fuselage. This is the part that's going to hold the tail wheel in place. And we've also installed R13 here on the bottom. And as you can see, there's also one there on the top. Now, it is extremely important these are aligned properly. And the way you know you've got proper alignment is you can see the vertical stringer right there beneath my finger. Okay, that front edge of the vertical stringer is going to line up with the rear portion of R13 for both the top and the bottom. These pieces are used to help hold the vertical stabilizer in place. The shaft for the vertical stabilizer passes through these holes here. Now, we're going to come on up here. You can see we've started adding our horizontal stringers. Here's our first one right up here. And then up on the front here, we've gone ahead and we've also added R7. Now, R7 is this piece right here. You can see just in front of my finger, that little lip. That's very important because there's a side hatch here on the front portion of the fuselage. So you want to make sure that that is glued in place. I'd recommend 30-minute epoxy so you can get a proper fit. All right. In addition, back here, one more piece I want to show you that we've added is R11. You can see that as well. That is also for a hatch that will be on the rear of the fuselage. So just keep that in mind. Now, one of the reasons why you're adding R13 here on the bottom and on the top, as well as R12 before adding the horizontal stringers, is because it creates the proper width on the rear of the fuselage. One of the first horizontal stringers that's going to go here on is going to extend right back here along the edge of R13. One here on the bottom and one on the top. What we also did, we also added a stringer up here directly behind this former here, which is the R5 on the former right there. Once you have those in place, then we can go ahead and we can start adding our horizontal stringers between each of these pieces on the top and the bottom. So that's important to keep in mind. All right, friends, more to come. All right, you can see we've got our cross members in place, and it just looks fantastic. And she is definitely starting to look more and more like a fuselage. All right, everybody, more to come. All right, friends, we're going to go ahead and put in our floor that's going to be used to hold the batteries and or fuel, depending upon how you're going to power your plane. In this case, it'll be electric. It is just two pieces of 4mm plywood that are laminated together, glued together, as you can see there. Okay. All right, let's get this glued in. All right, friends, you can see we've got R8, which is our battery tray slash fuel tank flooring in place. So now we need to go ahead and shift our focus now and install R9. Now, R9 is a support that's going to be used to help hold the screws in place that are going to hold the landing gear in place. So basically, it's just additional reinforcement. And the way this goes in is that you just take it and it winds up being put in like so. Now, it's very important to remember it's 4mm shorter on the left than on the right. So keep that in mind because that determines proper placement. So now what we're going to do is we just take this. We'll just wind up dropping this in place like so. Down here. There we go. And that's how it's going to sit. Now, there are these right angle pieces that it comes with. And the way it's supposed to work is that you've got the longer slot here is supposed to go into the slot down here. The smaller slot is supposed to go into this slot here. But the problem I realize is that they really got the order wrong in the instruction manual. Because what really should have happened, it's going to be impossible to fit those in place. What should have happened, it should have said in the instruction manual to put these in first, put this in second, and the floor in third. That would have worked a lot better, but it didn't. So we're going to have to make some changes here with those right angles to get everything to fit. But nonetheless, easy fix. All right, let's get that installed, and more to come. All right, friends, we were able to go ahead and fix the issue we had with getting the right angle piece in place. What we did is we went ahead and we lengthened the slot here so we could take the right angle piece, simply drop it into the extended slot, as you can see right here. And then by going through and dropping it into the extended slot, we were then able to take this and slide this back up against the former, like so. There we go. Perfect. And that's a perfect fit. All right, let's get this glued in place and more to come. All right, friends, our servo tray is in place. I think I may have accidentally put this in the wrong position. So when you build your servo tray, which is done outside of the fuselage, make sure that the servo openings are actually to the right side of the fuselage, not the left. I may have to wind up cutting another slot over here for the servo, but that's okay. In the front, we have our RL2. RL2 is very important. It ties in these two formers because this front portion here is going to be sheeted, so this is going to act as support for the sheeting. All right, let's keep on keeping on. More to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, you can see the kit comes with two firewall reinforcement pieces, specifically part number R3A. One goes in the front of the firewall, one goes on the rear, and you can differentiate which is top and which is bottom by the curved section here. The curved portion is the top, the squared off portion is on the bottom. And the way it's attached is that you simply come over to the aircraft and just simply glue it right onto the firewall, like so, on the front and the rear. All right, let's get these things attached. All right, R3A is attached to the front of the firewall and to the rear of the firewall. More to come. All right, friends, we're beginning the process of putting on our bottom sheeting. Let's take a look at this. So the rear sheeting back here is two pieces that are glued together, and the front sheeting, which is right here, this piece, is just a singular piece. Now, there's going to be a gap between the front sheeting and the rear sheeting because that's where the landing gear goes. As you can see here, there's that open space. So you want to keep that space open. And all you have to do really with the front sheeting is pretty straightforward. Just make sure it sits flush with the firewall here and, of course, with the sides. And then that'll give you the proper spacing for the landing gear here. All right, let's get our sheeting attached. The front sheeting is in place. The rear sheeting is drying, and the bottom sheeting is complete. One thing I forgot to mention, when applying the bottom sheeting, it's very important to make sure that you drill the hole in the bottom sheeting for the carbon fiber rod for the vertical stabilizer. The carbon fiber rod comes out of the bottom of the fuselage, and a control horn will be attached to it that will drive the tail wheel. It's very important to drill the hole for the carbon fiber rod before applying the top sheeting. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our top sheeting. And the top sheeting is in place. Friendly tip, make sure to install your vertical stabilizer in the hole in the top of the sheeting to determine proper placement. And the top sheeting is done. Now let's shift our focus to the luggage compartment area over here, so that way we can create a hatch. All right, friends, as we continue our update, we're about to build the frame for the luggage hatch. You can see the hatch itself there on the left, that is the fiberglass piece, and then on the right, the frame itself is made up of 5 pieces, all beginning with R20. So if you're building it, just keep that in mind. All right, let's get our pieces glued together and get it glued to our frame. More to come. All right, friends, you can see we've gone ahead and begun the process of attaching the luggage hatch on the back of the fuselage. Let's talk about what you're seeing here. So right off the bat, as I mentioned before, there's 5 pieces. you can see we've gone ahead, we've put 4 of them together. And these are all R20. We've got the piece here, the other 2 here, and the one right here. Now, the piece that you don't glue is this piece right here. It will be glued, but don't glue it until this part of the frame is built, because as you can see, this needs to sit on the fuselage, and this piece has to be 90 degrees to R5. That's this former right here, okay? So keep that in mind. So once you have that in place, then you can go ahead and glue the frame. What's going to happen, this frame that we're building is then going to be glued to the inside of the fiberglass frame. But before we go to the fiberglass frame, there are a couple other things we need to do. But right now, let's get that piece glued. All right, you can see our frame is assembled now. We've got our piece glued on. So now our next step is we're going to go through, we're going to wind up drilling a hole through the actual frame and also through the former, and we're going to insert a dowel here. And then you'll notice there's a hole back here. We're going to be putting a magnet here, and then of course on the top of the sheeting as well. That way, when you go to attach this, all you have to do is just slide it forward. The magnet holds it in place, as does the dowel in the front. All right, let's keep on keeping on. All right, friends, as we continue our update, let's talk about how we went ahead and installed the magnets for the luggage hatch. So first of all, you're looking at the bottom of the frame for the luggage hatch. What we did for the bottom of the luggage frame here on the rear and on this scrap piece here is we drilled a 1/2-inch hole. We also did the same thing here on the sheeting for the fuselage. Now, in order to determine proper placement, the magnet needs to sit flush with the frame here. And then because the magnet is thinner than the thickness of this wood, what it did on the opposite side is that it created a nice well. And then we took some epoxy, we filled in that well and put a scrap piece of plywood over top to hold it in place. Now, you never want to use CA to hold your rare earth magnets in place, and I can say this from personal experience. Repeated removal and placement eventually causes the magnet to become loose. Using epoxy helps to hold the magnet in place. Now, what we did for the bottom magnet is we just took a scrap piece of wood, as I mentioned a second ago, drilled a 1/2-inch hole, and you'll notice that the magnet sticks out a little bit higher than the wood. And the reason for that is because you have to also take into consideration the thickness of the top sheeting, because you want this magnet to sit perfectly flush with the wood. After we went ahead and determined the proper placement, we then went ahead and filled in the little well on the bottom with epoxy and put a scrap piece of wood underneath as well. Now, let me show you exactly how we determine the proper placement of the magnet in relation to the top sheeting. You'll notice that we took a rectangular rare earth magnet, placed it directly over top of the magnet that's going to be glued to the underside of the sheeting, and that gave a perfectly flush surface. We then very carefully removed the rectangular magnet, and then, as I mentioned a second ago, we glued this the magnet to the scrap piece of plywood. All right, let's go ahead. Let's get the magnets glued in place, and I'll show you how it works. All right, friends, you can see we've got our magnet attached, and let me show you how this works. So you just simply take it and slide it back when you want to remove it, and there you go. Now, what we also did, in addition to putting the magnet here, we took a 1/8-inch piece of a bamboo skewer, which you can pick up in any grocery store, and we went ahead and drilled a 1/8-inch hole here on the luggage compartment frame, and also through the former right here, and you can see that little hole up there as well. And then that helps to hold it in place, because when we want to put the cover back in place over the luggage compartment, we simply slide this forward like so, and just go ahead and get this so it slides into the hole, and there you go. Perfect fit. All right, we're going to shift our focus now to the luggage compartment cover. It is fiberglass, so there's 2 things we need to do before we actually glue it to the frame. And that is, number 1, we're going to use a 400 grit sandpaper on the exterior in preparation for the actual painting. And number 2, we're going to use some dish soap to help remove all of the mold release, both on the top and on the bottom. And the reason for that is because from the top, if you have mold release on there, it will affect how well the paint adheres to the actual cover. And on the bottom, if you don't get as much of the mold release off, it could actually affect how well the cover attaches to the frame and actually stays on. So keep that in mind whenever you're doing any type of fiberglass work of any kind in terms of gluing parts directly to a fiberglass part. All right, let's continue with our preparation here. More to come. All right, friends, we are gluing our luggage hatch to the frame for the luggage hatch. What we did is we used 30-minute epoxy. We needed some working time to be able to properly spread the glue all over the frame. And I also used micro balloons as well. You can easily find these on Amazon anywhere. But with the micro balloons, I find that when you're gluing something to a fiberglass part, it provides better adherence. It's less likely to come loose through repeated use. So just a friendly tip. All right, let's let that sit. More to come. All right, friends, we've got our main landing gear mounted and in place. The kit did not include any hardware for mounting the landing gear, so we just wound up using 8/32 screws along with the 8/32 blind nuts, and the blind nuts are held in place with a little bit of Gorilla Glue. All right, while that's drying, let's shift our focus to the tail wheel. And you can see here, this is what's included in the kit. Sullivan makes excellent products. It's a wonderful tail wheel, but it's not very scale looking. So what I happen to have in the shop was the old CB Associates leaf spring tail wheel. It's a great tail wheel assembly. It's got a little bit of rust on it, no big deal, but nothing that a little Rust-Oleum can't take care of. All right, let's get our tail wheel assembly mounted. All right, friends, you can see we've got our tail wheel bracket in place. And what we did, much like we did with the main landing gear, we went ahead and we wound up using 2 blind nuts and 10/32 socket heads to hold the tail wheel bracket in place. All right, let's go ahead now and shift our focus to the front of the aircraft as we go ahead and sheet the top portion between the first and second former. More to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, you can see we've added the sheeting to the front and it looks really good. Now, I know it's not perfect, but that's okay. Let me explain what we did here. So typically what the instructions had shown was to go through, put the sheeting down, and then gradually go ahead and curve it so it would easily fit flush, and it would just be one big piece. Now, normally that wouldn't be a problem, but because the rear angle here is so acute, even when the wood was wet down with a combination of 1 part water, 1 part 70% isopropyl alcohol, and really wet it down, it still kept cracking. So I realized at that point the best thing to do was just the top flat portion here of the former could easily accommodate a solid sheet. But once we start getting to the curved portions, you had to cut strips that were approximately roughly about 1/8 of an inch to just a little over 1/8 of an inch. Now the final piece down here obviously could be a little bit bigger. So it doesn't look perfect, but that's okay. We're going to fill this in, we're going to sand it, and it's just going to look great. And once it's covered, you won't even notice these little ridges right here. All right, let's go ahead and finish that up, and more to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, you can see we've got our sheeting sanded and filled in, and it just looks so much better than what it did before. All right, let's shift our focus now to the cowl mounting block so we can mount our cowling in place. More to come. All right, friends, as we continue our update, we've got 7 cowl mounting blocks that'll go on here. And it's pretty straightforward. You've got a little lip from the side of the fuselage here, so you just need to take the cowl blocks and you just put one here, and you're going to put one here, and then a couple other places as well. So let's get them glued in. All right, friends, we've got our cowl blocks in place, and they look great. Let's talk about what we've got going on here. So you see we've drilled some holes in all the different cowl blocks, and the reason for that is because while you can just glue them on, the issue occurs over time due to the vibration of the engine, whether it's gas or electric. The blocks can actually come loose, even if you use epoxy. And the biggest issue with that is once the cowling comes loose, you've got a real major issue in the air, and you got to get the plane down quick. So simplest fix, easiest way of preventing this, bamboo skewers, about 1/8 of an inch. Drill 2 holes in each block, and then just take the bamboo skewer, push it right into the hole, get it all the way through the actual firewall itself, and then a little tiny bit of CA just in front right here, and that holds it in place, and the blocks never come off. All right, let's go ahead and finish up. More to come. All right, friends, we've got our cowling in place, and she just looks fantastic. That's it for the fuselage, at least for right now. We're going to be installing the engine later on. We're going to shift our focus now to the stabilator, which is the combination stabilizer elevator. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. More to come.